The night I drove back to Millhaven, I almost turned around 3 times. I had the address memorized. 412 Creston Road, even though I hadn't said it out loud in 11 years. Some things your body holds onto whether your brain wants them or not. The exit off I-70 still smelled like diesel and pine, and the gas station on Route 9 still had that hand-painted sign that said warms and live bait, though now someone had added cold brew underneath it, which almost made me laugh. Almost. I pulled into the parking lot of a Holiday Inn Express on the edge of town and sat in my car for 20 minutes with the engine running. It was a Tuesday in October. The trees were doing that thing they do in Colorado, burning orange and gold like the whole hillside was on fire, and I remember thinking it was almost cruel, how beautiful it looked, how ordinary everything seemed. My phone buzzed. My attorney. "You sure you want to do this in person? We could handle all of it remotely." I typed back, "Yes, I need to see it. I didn't sleep much that night. Let me back up, because if I just tell you what happened at that house, it won't make sense. It'll sound like the kind of story where you pick a side too fast and miss the whole thing. I'm 32 years old. I'm a registered nurse. I work nights at a trauma center in Denver, which means I have seen people at the absolute worst moments of their lives, and I have learned, the hard way, that the stories people tell about themselves are almost never the whole truth, including mine. My parents moved to Millhaven from outside Akron when I was 3. My father took a job managing a regional distribution center, and my mother, she was the kind of woman who made a home look effortless. Clean floors, a vegetable garden in the backyard, casseroles delivered to sick neighbors. From the outside, we were the family people pointed to at church as an example of something good. I have one older brother. He is 18 months older than me, and for most of my childhood, I would have described him as my best friend. We built forts in the backyard. We stayed up too late watching bad horror movies. When he got his driver's license, he drove me to school every single morning for 2 years without complaining once. I tell you this because I need you to understand. I loved my family, whatever came after. I didn't stop loving them. That's the part that took me the longest to accept. My grandmother, my father's mother, passed away when I was 19. She lived in a farmhouse outside of Glenwood Springs, about 3 hours west of us, and she was the kind of woman who kept everything in a cedar box and never talked about money but clearly thought about it constantly. She was quiet and particular, and she smelled like lavender, and she always called me by my full name, Josephine, even when everyone else had shortened it to Joe since the 2nd grade. When she died, my parents handled everything: the service, the arrangements, the estate. I was a sophomore in college. I trusted them completely. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for 11 years, was what was actually in that will. My grandmother had left me the farmhouse. Not my parents, not my brother, me. The farmhouse and the 31 acres it sat on, which by the time I found out, had appreciated significantly due to a county land reassessment and interest from 2 separate developers who wanted access to the back acreage. My parents never told me. They had the will filed through a probate attorney in Garfield County, listed themselves as co-administrators of the estate, and simply kept the house. Continued to use the property as a vacation getaway a few times a year, renting it out the rest of the time through a property management company whose deposits, I later discovered, went into an account I had never heard of. I found out because my grandmother's attorney, the original one who drafted the will, not the one my parents used for probate, tracked me down. He was 81 years old and recently diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's, and I think the diagnosis made him want to close open loops. He'd tried to contact me years earlier, he said, but the address he had was my parents' house, and the letter had, apparently, never reached me. He called my cell number through the hospital I worked at. He told me he was very sorry it had taken this long. I sat in the parking garage of the trauma center for 45 minutes after that call. Then I drove home, made coffee I didn't drink, and stared at the wall of my apartment until 2 in the morning. Then I called an attorney. Here is the thing about being the person in your family who left. They make it a character flaw. I hadn't meant to leave exactly. After college I took a position in Denver because that's where the job was. And then a relationship kept me there. And then the relationship ended, but the job had become a career, and the city had become home. And suddenly it was 5 years, and I was only going back to Millhaven for Christmas, and sometimes not even that. My mother made comments. My father made silences, which were worse. My brother, who still lived 20 minutes from them, who coached my nephew's soccer team, and showed up every Sunday for dinner, became the default good child without either of us officially acknowledging the shift. I wasn't estranged, that's important to say. We texted, we video called on birthdays, but there was a distance that had gone from geographical to something harder to name. and I think we had all agreed, silently, to let it stay. So when I drove to Millhaven that Tuesday in October, it had been 8 months since I'd seen them in person. Thanksgiving the year before, my mother had made a comment about my apartment being too small for someone my age. My father had asked if I was seeing anyone with a tone that meant he was tired of asking, and my brother and I had sat beside each other at the table and barely talked, and I had left after dessert, claiming an early shift. I hadn't told them I was coming. My attorney had advised me to make contact before showing up. Give them the chance to respond through legal channels, keep everything civil, and I planned to. I really did. But when I turned onto Creston Road and saw the mailbox, the same black mailbox with the crooked number 4 my dad had meant to fix for 15 years, something in me just needed to see the house first, just see it. I parked on the street, the lights were on inside. Through the front window I could see the flicker of the television. My mother's hydrangeas were still in the front beds, cut back for winter. The driveway had a new concrete surface that I didn't recognise. I sat there for 10 minutes. Then my mother walked past the window, carrying a mug, and she stopped. She looked out. I don't know if she saw me or just saw a car she didn't recognise, but she stopped, and I felt my stomach drop to somewhere around my ankles, and I started the car and drove back to the Holiday Inn. I met them the next morning at a diner on the main strip called Halsey's. I chose the location deliberately, public, neutral, a place where everyone had to keep their voice down because the tables were close together and the waitress would hear. My brother was there too. I hadn't expected that. My mother had called him, apparently. He sat across from me with the expression of a man who had been called into a meeting without an agenda and was quietly furious about it. I put a folder on the table. I had printed the relevant sections of the will, the probate records, the property transfer documents, and a summary letter from my attorney. I slid it toward the centre of the table. I wanted to tell you myself before anything official happened, I said, because I thought you deserved that. My father looked at the folder and didn't touch it. My mother said Joe. Just that, my name. In a tone that managed to contain an entire argument I hadn't made yet. I know, I said. I know what it says. I've had a month to sit with it. I'm not here to fight. Then why are you here, my brother said. I looked at him. He was still my brother. He had the same hairline my father had at his age, the same way of pressing his jaw tight when he was upset. I had known this person my whole life. Because she was my grandmother too, I said. And she let me something. And I deserved to know that. My mother set down her mug. It was complicated, she said. The estate was complicated. Your father and I made decisions we thought were best for everyone. You thought keeping her farmhouse and renting it out for 11 years was best for everyone. We maintained it, my father said. It was the first thing he'd said since I sat down. We paid the taxes. We kept it from falling apart. You were 20 years old. You were in college. What were you going to do with a farmhouse in Glenwood Springs? That wasn't your call to make. He looked at me. My father has blue eyes that used to make me feel safe when I was small, and they still had that quality somehow, that steadiness, even now when everything was broken. It was complicated, he said again. They said that a lot. Complicated. As though complexity were an explanation instead of a context. My brother said nothing else the entire breakfast. He ordered coffee and didn't drink it. When I got up to leave, he followed me out to the parking lot. Joe, he caught my arm. Not rough, just stopping me. I turned. How long have you known? He asked. A month. He nodded slowly. He looked like he was running calculations. Did you know that I didn't know either? I hadn't considered that. I looked at him. I found out this morning, he said. When Mom called me, his voice was very controlled. I didn't know. I want you to understand that. Something shifted in my chest. I hadn't expected that either. Okay, I said. I believe you. He nodded again. He put his hands in his jacket pockets. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said, which wasn't entirely true, but I wasn't ready to say the rest of it out loud to him. Not yet. What I did was go to Glenwood Springs. I drove there that afternoon, 3 hours west on I-70, through the canyon where the rock walls close in, and the river runs turquoise green below, and I pulled up to a farmhouse I had last visited when I was 19 years old for a funeral. The property management company had a lockbox on the door. My attorney had already sent formal notice that the property was under legal review, and all rental activity needed to pause, so the house was empty. I had a key code. I stood on the porch for a moment before I went in. The porch boards flexed under my feet the way old wood does. There was a wind chime at the corner that had been there since before I could remember. Copper tubes that my grandmother had bought at a craft fair sometime in the 80s. Still there, still making the same sound. Inside, the house smelled like someone else's cleaning products and a little bit, underneath that, like the cedar my grandmother kept in every closet. The furniture was different. My parents had replaced most of it, or the renters had changed things. The kitchen had a new backsplash. The bathroom had been updated at some point. But the bedroom at the end of the hall, the small one, the one I always slept in when we visited as kids, still had the same wallpaper. Pale yellow with tiny white flowers. My grandmother had put it up herself in the 70s and always refused to take it down, even though it had gone in and out of style twice. I sat on the bed in that room for a long time. I thought about my grandmother sitting at her kitchen table in the mornings, drinking her coffee from a mug that said, "World's okayst Grandma," which I had given her as a joke when I was 14, and she had kept for the rest of her life. I thought about how she used to ask me about my plans, not in the pressured way adults usually did, but with genuine curiosity, like she thought I might actually have some interesting ones. She had known something about me that I was still figuring out at 19, that I would leave, that I needed to, that it was the right thing for me, even if it complicated everything else, and she had tried to make sure I had something to come back to if I ever wanted. I didn't cry. I had cried plenty in the past month. I just sat there with the yellow wallpaper and the wind chime sound coming faint through the walls, and I let myself feel the full weight of what she had done and what had been kept from me. And then I got up and walked back through the house and locked the door behind me. The legal process took 4 months. My attorney filed the necessary documents with the Garfield County Court to establish my rightful ownership under the original will. My parents contested it initially. My mother hired an attorney, who argued that the estate administration had been conducted in good faith, and that significant improvements to the property offset any question of misallocation. Their attorney was not wrong that improvements had been made. He was wrong about almost everything else. In Colorado, a beneficiary's right to inherit a property doesn't expire because the administrator decided it was inconvenient. The original will was clear. The probate had been improperly managed. That's not a grey area. My father called me once during that period. He called on a Sunday night, and I could hear the TV in the background, and he said, "Joe, is there any way we can handle this as a family?" And I sat there holding the phone, and I thought about all the Sundays of my whole life. The dinners, the ordinary weekday evenings, the way he used to fall asleep in his chair watching football, and we would all just work around him. And I said, "Dad, you should have told me, that's all. You should have told me." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Your grandmother loved you a lot," he finally said. "I know," I said. "I know she did." We hung up. He didn't call again. My brother called twice. Those conversations were different. He was angry in a way he was directing mostly at our parents, which I understood. He had grown up in that house, lived near them, trusted them, and found out the same morning I confronted everyone at that diner that they had kept something this significant from both of us. He asked me once, quietly, if I thought they had done it for the money or out of some misguided belief that they were protecting me. I told him honestly that I thought it was probably both, which is the most human and also the saddest answer. In February, I became the legal owner of a farmhouse and 31 acres outside of Glenwood Springs, Colorado. The property had appraised, during the legal proceedings, at significantly more than I had expected. The back acreage that developers had been interested in was valued separately, and there was an existing lease inquiry from a conservation easement organization that wanted to protect the land from development while allowing continued agricultural use. That path would give me a tax benefit, a steady income from the easement payment, and the comfort of knowing the land would stay intact. I chose that path. I kept the house. I'm not going to tell you I made some grand renovation and turned it into a dream home overnight. I didn't. I spent a weekend there in March cleaning out the things the management company had left, pulling down some curtains that weren't mine, putting the furniture back in arrangements that felt closer to how I remembered. I found 3 of my grandmother's mugs in a cabinet that had been pushed to the back. I washed them and kept them. I go out there about once a month now. Sometimes I work a stretch of nights, sleep a few hours, and drive west through the canyon with the windows down. The house is small, the porch boards still flex. The wind chime is still there. My mother sent a card in March. A regular greeting card, the kind with a generic floral design, and inside it in her handwriting it said, "I hope you're well, I think about you." That was all. No apology, no explanation, just "I think about you." I put it in the kitchen drawer and I haven't thrown it away. My brother came out to the property in April. He brought his son, my nephew, who is 8 and has an enormous amount of opinions about everything, which I find delightful. We walked the back acreage in the afternoon sun, and my nephew found what he was convinced was Arrowhead, but was probably just an interesting rock, and my brother and I stood at the fence line looking at the mountains and didn't talk for a while. "She would have liked that you have it," he said eventually. Yeah, I said. I think so too. He glanced at me. Are you okay? I thought about it. Actually thought about it instead of giving the automatic answer. I'm getting there, I said. He nodded. We walked back to the house. People ask me sometimes, friends who know pieces of the story, whether I'm angry, whether I hate my parents, whether I feel vindicated. And I understand why they ask, because those would all be clean, usable emotions that point somewhere. The truth is messier. I'm a nurse. I spend my nights watching people navigate the worst hours of their lives, and I have learned that almost nobody is simply the villain of someone else's story. My parents made choices that were wrong. They were also, I think, people who convinced themselves over time that those choices were reasonable, and then built 11 years of ordinary family life on top of that foundation, and stopped looking at what was underneath. That doesn't make it okay. It doesn't undo what I lost. 11 years of knowing something that was mine. 11 years of a different kind of relationship to my grandmother's memory. Some of that I won't get back. But I also have the farmhouse. I have the wind chime. I have my nephew deciding that a regular rock might be an arrowhead. I have a piece of land in Colorado that someone who loved me decided to hold for me, across time, just in case I needed it. I drove back to Denver after that April weekend with my brother, and somewhere around the Eisenhower Tunnel where the highway climbs up and then drops down, and the city starts to appear in the distance below, I thought, I am going to be okay, not fixed, not finished. Not without things left to grieve. But okay, mine, moving forward on ground I actually own.